In this lecture, we're going to be unwrapping by marking seams. The selected geometry is the focus of this lecture. So if you haven't already, please go and try to unwrap this on your own. And when you're done, come back and watch this lecture. Okay, so I assume you've done all that and you're ready to go. So let's go ahead and start unwrapping. I'm going to go to solid mode and just face select one of the faces here. Link select the rest. Hide everything else, zoom in, and let's focus on just this object for right now. So whenever I'm unwrapping by marking seams, I try to think of the object as a cardboard box, and my assignment is to take some box cutters and basically try to minimize the number of cuts, because the more cuts you have, the harder it is to paint on the flattened surface. So our objective is always minimal cuts. When I work like this, I have a couple of guidelines that I try to follow. First, I try to find one of the faces or one of the sides that will serve as a good front face. I say front face because what I'm thinking is from that vantage point, I can basically fold out, sometimes on 4 edges, sometimes on 3 or whatever. But basically from whatever I decide is my front face, I know that everything around it is going to fold out. And that helps me decide where the seams are going to go. In a situation like this, you have this side here, which is basically this weird irregular shape. Okay, so this isn't really going to be a really good front face because if you think about it, it's going to be really hard to fold over on any one of these edges. So that's not going to work. So what if we take a look over here? Any one of these flattened faces could potentially serve as a front face. Take a look at this selected one right here. How would it look if it folded over? Well, probably because of this angle, it wouldn't really work so well. You might be able to get away with this face, definitely this one. So if we look at this in top-down view, you can see that this lines up perfectly with a grid. If you look at this in side view, again, it lines up perfectly with a grid. If you look at it in front view, again, perfectly with a grid. So this is an ideal candidate. And sometimes you're not lucky enough to find a piece like this. So we're going to treat this as the front face, and we're going to figure out where to mark our seams based on this being the front. And remember, the general rule here is if this is the front, then it's going to fold here, here, and here. And since there's nothing back here, there's nothing to fold back there. So I'm going to basically start by marking this as a seam, because that's all void space on the other side of it. And since this is a fold and this is a fold, I know that this is going to be a seam. Same thing on the other side. Now if we go back to our front face and look over this fold, you can see that everything else just folds and stacks together. That's going to unwrap very nicely just like that. For this object, that's all the seams we really need. So let's go over to our UV editing window, center in on this. Let's go ahead and mark those seams and select all and unwrap. Nice clean shape. Let's go associate our UV grid with this. And that's basically it. Let's move on to the next piece. So I'm going to zoom out and unhide everything. And the next piece is underneath the tank. So I'm going to use face selection. Select any part of this piece down here and link select the rest. Hide everything else and zoom in. This really does get easier the more that you do it. So when I look at this, I immediately know where to throw the seams. I look at an object like this and I first look for irregular sides. A side like this is very irregular. There's nothing right angled on this. This is definitely one of the sides. If I think of my same rule, find the front face, and then from there figure out where the sides are. Well, sometimes you can see the sides easier than you can see the front face, and this is really a good example of that. So if you look around, any one of these could be the front face. Maybe this is the front face, and it rolls over like that. Maybe this is the front face, and it rolls over that way. Or perhaps this is the front face. A lot of times what I do is, even though I do this in my head, I look at it this way. So this is a top view. Here's a side view, and it's kind of diagonal, so that's not really going to work for me. Let's try this one here. So here's top view. It's nice and on the grid. Here's the front view. It's perfectly on grid. And here's side view. That's perfectly on grid. I don't really need to look any further than that because I can tell just at a glance that this is going diagonal. So really this is the best candidate for our front face. So with that little bit of knowledge, let's go ahead and start marking some seams. Knowing that this is the front, it's going to fold all around this entire perimeter. So all I need to do is start edge selecting everything other than those folds. Just like that. So it folds here, 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 and here. So obviously these are seams. And then I can go to these irregular edges and just complete the shape. Same thing on the other side. And then all we really need to do is just figure out where it goes from here. So it rolls over the top, and then it rolls over to the back side, and then it does the same thing on the bottom. So it rolls over to the bottom and to the back side. Now, all I need to do is basically figure out where to mark the back edge. And a lot of times what I do is I look for crevices like this, because this little fold right here is going to be the ideal place to put a seam. If you think about it, you'll be able to tuck the graphic right into that little space there. It's kind of a nice little way to just kind of hide the seam by tucking it into a dark little crevice like that. So that's really the perfect place to mark as a seam. Let's go ahead and mark all of that. Jump over to the UV editing window, zoom in on this, select all, and unwrap. And let's see what this looks like with our checkerboard pattern. That's basically it. So let's go and unhide and take a look at what we've got here. Not bad. Now, rather than jumping into the next piece and making this a very long lecture, we're going to save the next piece for its own lecture, and the next piece is going to be this cabin and the windows here. So I'll select it right now so that you know exactly what we're working on. If you haven't already, go ahead and unwrap the selection that you see here and try to be a step ahead. And then when you're done, go into the next lecture and we'll compare notes, okay? Good luck. I'll see you in the next one.